Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a quiet medieval alleyway just before sunrise. The cobblestones are slick with dew, the lanterns flicker like nervous fireflies, and the town's still asleep, well, except for you. You're walking slowly, boots creaking, leather hood tucked under your arm, because you have a job to do. Not the kind that ends in a neat little office lunch. Nope. You're the town's executioner. The funny part? You're not running from an angry mob. People nod politely as you pass. Some even wave. It's not what you were expecting, is it? The man with the axe or sword or flaming branding iron, respected? Yes. Strange, but true. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach the square just as the sky begins to pinken. There's a rhythm to this job, a kind of choreography. You're not a raving villain, more like the custodian of justice, with an unfortunate costume and a wildly misunderstood resume. In fact, one of your main tools isn't even your blade, it's your ability to stay calm. It's a sleepy kind of calm too, the kind that only comes from knowing that, oddly enough, nobody's coming for your head. You weren't always this relaxed. Your first day was a mess. You dropped your tools. Your palms were so sweaty they nearly unbuckled your belt. You looked into the eyes of a condemned man and saw, not fear, but relief. Turns out, you were known for your clean work, and in a world without anesthesia or last-minute appeals, that meant something. You may have been the last person someone saw, but you were also their chance at a merciful ending. Despite what they write in bad novels, you didn't just swing a sword and vanish into shadows. No, your mornings often start with paperwork. Official logs. Confirming names, crimes, sentences. Sometimes, even checking in with the priest to coordinate timing. Because yes, this job involves scheduling. You trudge to the town hall before sunrise. The bailiff hands you a scroll. A name, a crime, a sentence. Theft, repeat offense. No hanging today, he says. Just a branding. You nod. Branding's quick. Smoky. Smells like burned bacon and regret. But it's over fast, and sometimes the criminal shakes your hand afterward. Not kidding, happens more often than you'd think. By mid-morning, you're prepping. Not for a dramatic beheading, but for town inspection. Your tools have to be clean, visibly clean. A rusty blade is a moral failure. Not just because it hurts more, but because it looks sloppy. Image matters. One historian even found execution manuals recommending rose oil on blades, not for the condemned, but for the watching crowd. People come to watch, yes. Kids sneak peeks through shutters. Merchants stop unloading crates to gape. You try not to notice, but it's hard. There's a weird pressure, like you're on stage. If you fumble the ropes or strike unevenly, you'll hear about it at the tavern for months. And yes, you do go to taverns. You even get discounts. Not always because people like you, sometimes it's just that fear discounts are still discounts. But often, it's genuine. You keep the town orderly. You're the reminder that crime doesn't vanish, it's just cleaned up with precision. People talk to you. Not just whisper behind your back. They ask questions. About justice. About God. About the man you executed last week. Did he cry? Someone asks. Did he confess? These aren't bloodthirsty questions, they're anxious ones. Everyone's terrified they might end up where he did. You walk the market later, off-duty, cloak wrapped tight. A butcher tips his hat. A woman selling herbs offers you a sprig of lavender, for your work, she says. You thank her, tuck it behind your belt. People like giving you things. Gifts for a clean conscience. Or maybe they think you're cursed and want to bribe away the bad luck. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly shunned or just mythologized into solitude. Truth is, it depended on the town, and the executioner. Yours is a mid-sized German town, 14th century. You're not ostracized. You have a home. A family. People wave when your kids pass by. Still, they whisper, too. It's a strange dance: respect, curiosity, fear. Some parents warn their kids to behave or, "You'll visit the executioner." Others send those same kids to ask if you'll teach them to use a sword. Tonight, you oil your tools by candlelight. The branding iron, the short rope, the slender axe you use more for ritual than punishment. The tools are quiet, each with its own story. Some were handed down from your mentor. One has initials carved in the handle, yours, carefully etched by your daughter when she was 6. She thought it was just a blacksmith's tool. You didn't correct her. You sleep lightly. Partly habit, partly nerves. Sometimes the bell rings in the night, summoning you to the jail for a last-minute confession or a change of sentence. You've seen it all. The trembling nobleman. The serene thief. The sobbing teenager. You don't pass judgment, that's not your role. But you listen. And sometimes, just sometimes, you offer a final kindness, a prayer, a sip of wine, a fast end. Dawn comes again. You rise. The cycle repeats. This job is strange, sacred, feared. But peaceful? Yes, in a twisted, meditative way. You carry other people's endings so they don't have to. It's not glorious. It's not evil. It's necessary. And for you, it's life. You make your way through the narrow lanes, past the bakery with its warm, yeasty air, past the inn where a drunk still snores on the stoop, and toward the edge of the town square. The fog hangs low today, curling around your boots like it's trying to pull you back to bed. But you've got rounds to make, and believe it or not, a few appointments. Because as odd as it sounds, being a medieval executioner involves more socializing than solitude. People think you're a loner, cursed to walk among shadows. But truth is, you get more dinner invitations than the town priest. There's a widow who insists you stop by every Wednesday for cabbage stew. You're too thin, she says, though you're not. A merchant's son wants you to bless his dagger. Some think your touch wards off disease. Others just think it's polite. You pause outside the blacksmith's shop. He's hammering early, the rhythmic clinks echoing down the stone walls. You nod. He nods. No fear, no flinching. You've known him for years. He once reforged your broken blade and didn't charge a coin. Said it was community service. Inside the chapel, the priest gives you a wary smile. You exchange small talk, mostly about weather and wheat prices. The real tension lies unspoken. He prays for souls. You collect them. Still, you're on the same team, sort of. And when it comes time for last rites, you wait patiently, just outside the cell door, letting the condemned speak to their God in peace. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly feared or secretly revered. The evidence is scattered and contradictory. Some towns buried their executioners outside city walls, while others paid them better than the mayor. You're somewhere in the middle. Not beloved. Not reviled. Just known. You walk to the public well, where the baker's wife waves you over. Her husband's back is giving him trouble, and she wonders if you still have that salve you made for joint pain. The irony doesn't escape you, people asking the hangman for healing. But your knowledge of anatomy and herbal concoctions comes in handy more than once. So, you dig into your pouch and hand her a small pot of thick, minty-smelling cream. "Thank you," she says. "You're not so scary after all." You smile. Don't let the hood fool you. She laughs. Not nervously. Genuinely. It's almost unsettling. You continue to the apothecary, where you're due to pick up a poultice for an infected hand, your own, unfortunately. Rope work can be unforgiving. Inside, the shelves are lined with jars, dried bat wings, poppy husks, even something labeled mummy dust. You suspect it's just crushed charcoal and beetroot. The apothecary gives you a wink and hands over your packet. He also mentions he's having trouble with a debtor who won't pay. Would you mind stopping by? He asks. You raise an eyebrow. As the executioner, or as a concerned neighbor? He shrugs. Whichever gets results. That's another part of your job. Your presence alone is often enough. You don't need to draw your sword. Just showing up, with your particular reputation, is like a medieval cease and desist letter. You swing by the jail on your way home, checking in with the constable. There's no one new in the cells today. Just the usual drunk who mistook the chapel font for a urinal. You nod, make a joke about holy water, and leave. On the way back, a child runs up to you, barefoot, maybe 7 years old. He asks if you'll come to his birthday feast. His mother turns crimson and scolds him, but you laugh and say you'll try. Later that night, she leaves a small pie on your doorstep. People don't always know how to thank you. Or maybe they're not sure why they're thanking you. But they do. Your family, meanwhile, has grown used to your odd rhythm. Your spouse, calm, practical, keeps a tidy home and a sharper wit. The two of you met years ago, back when you were still an apprentice. They said they liked your quiet eyes. You never understood that compliment, but it stuck with you. Your children ask questions sometimes. You answer honestly. What do you do with the people, they ask. You pause. I help carry out justice. Do they scream? Sometimes. Sometimes not. Are they bad? Not always. You don't lie to them. But you let them build their own stories. Let them believe, for now, that your job is part of some sacred, necessary balance, because, honestly, it kind of is. At supper, your neighbor stops by to borrow a hammer. He doesn't flinch when you open the door. Doesn't even glance at the tools hanging neatly on your wall. You share a drink on the stoop afterward. Talk about the upcoming harvest. About the mayor's gout. About that time the rooster chased his dog. You both laugh until you cough. It's easy to forget what you do, sometimes. Until someone reminds you. Like the girl at the river who drops her laundry when she sees you. Or the beggar who crosses himself when you pass. Or the merchant who goes pale and mutters, "Don't look at me like that." But most of the time, people treat you like, well, like a necessary part of life. Like the butcher. Or the gravedigger. No one loves your job. But no one wants to do it either. You spend the evening sharpening your tools, not because you have a sentence tomorrow, but because they need attention. Maintenance is half the job. You run the whetstone slowly along the blade, the soft rasp of metal soothing in its own way. Outside, the night deepens. A dog barks. An owl hoots. The village exhales into sleep. And you? You watch the fire crackle, oil your hands, and wonder, will people remember you kindly? Or not at all? The truth is, it doesn't matter much. You live quietly, die quietly, and leave behind tools someone else will someday pick up. Maybe your apprentice. Maybe not. But for now, the town rests easier knowing you're out there. Walking the streets. Talking to neighbors. Laughing at the market. Executioner? Yes. But also friend. Healer. Listener. Necessary. Your boots crunch over gravel as you step into the courtyard of the old training yard, once a private garden, now a place of instruction. You're here to meet a new apprentice. Scrawny, nervous, all elbows and fidgeting fingers. You remember your own start, years ago, when your hands shook every time you touched a blade. It's not the blade that haunts you, it's the silence before it strikes. You look him over. He's got the wrong shoes. Slippery soles. You'll fix that later. First, you hand him a wooden dummy head and a dulled sword. Swing, you say. He does. Badly. But he tries again. Better this time. You correct his stance. Adjust his grip. Execution, after all, is precision. You can't afford a botched job. Not for your sake. For theirs. The condemned deserve efficiency, even if the law doesn't always deserve them. Training isn't just technique, though. There's philosophy. A code, even if no one writes it down. You explain the unspoken rules, always look them in the eye, never make promises, and never enjoy it. He blinks. Never enjoy it? You nod. If you enjoy it, you're already lost. Historians still argue whether executioners were chosen for cruelty or discipline. The romantic version paints you as a reluctant servant of justice, the cynical one sees you as a tool for power, no better than a hired knife. But the truth? Somewhere muddled in the middle. Your mentor once said the job's not about ending lives, it's about finishing stories. And doing it cleanly. You walk your apprentice to the back shed where the older tools hang. There's a rack of swords, each with a notch, a name, or a story. One belonged to your predecessor. A heavy thing, too broad for finesse, but it taught you patience. Another, thin and fast, the blade you carried during the plague years. You pass your hand over it absently. Nearby, a log rests in a frame, used for practicing swings. Not on heads, of course, but melons, bundles of straw, even meat from the butcher's scraps. Your apprentice eyes the bloodstains. You don't explain them. He'll learn. The training is physical, yes, but also mental. You test his focus, patience, ability to stand still for hours. Execution days are long, and waiting is part of the rhythm. So is handling people, angry mobs, grieving families, anxious guards. You teach him how to nod without agreeing, how to speak with gravity without arrogance. One day, during drills, he freezes. You were expecting it. Most apprentices break a little when the training dummy has a painted face. He drops the sword. Breathes fast. You sit beside him on the bench and wait. Eventually, he asks, "Do they always look afraid?" You think about it. About the dozens, maybe hundreds, you've faced. Sometimes, you say. But sometimes they look relieved. He frowns. Why? Because the waiting is worse. Your apprentice isn't the only one you teach. Local guards often ask for sword lessons. Some of the town boys sneak glances through the fence, mimicking your stances with sticks. One even sent you a drawing, of you standing proudly, sword in hand, like a knight. It's currently folded into your journal. The mayor, too, once asked for a favor. His cousin, a young nobleman, had been caught in a duel gone wrong. The sentence was death, but he begged for dignity. You trained the lad yourself, helped him write letters, taught him how to die with his chin up. It wasn't mercy, but it was something close. You remember that execution clearly. It rained. The square was quiet. You wore your best coat. The nobleman looked at you with a small smile. Not forgiveness, exactly. Just recognition. As if to say, you didn't save me, but you didn't ruin me either. Your apprentice watches all this, learning quietly. He polishes the tools now, checks the grain of the ropes, helps you oil the iron cuffs. He's starting to ask smarter questions, like, what do I do if the crowd starts throwing things, or how do you make sure it's quick? You show him the weight of each sword. Explain balance. Momentum. You even take him on rounds, show him how you speak to priests, how you record details, how you never, ever forget a name. Still, you wonder if he'll last. Some leave before their first real sentence. Others stay for all the wrong reasons. You watch him carefully, not just his skill, but his silences. How he sits after a long day. What he dreams about, when he thinks you're not listening to his sleep murmurs. One evening, he brings you tea. His hands don't shake. He says he wants to take over a branding job, small-time thief, nothing fatal. You agree. You supervise. He hesitates once, then does it cleanly. The man grits his teeth but doesn't scream. Afterward, your apprentice vomits behind the stables. Then wipes his mouth and says, "I'm okay." He's not, but that's expected. Neither were you, the first time. Later, you sit by the fire and tell him stories. About the time you had to deal with a bishop's cousin who refused to kneel. About a noblewoman who insisted on singing all the way to the block. About a case where you had to execute a man who looked exactly like your brother. He asks if that last one was true. You don't answer. Training continues. He grows stronger. Calmer. The town begins to recognize him, nods, half smiles, curious stares. You notice how he stands straighter now, how he sharpens tools without being told. He'll be ready soon. And when he is, you'll pass him the blade, not the best one, not the worst, but the one that taught you balance. You'll watch from the sidelines as he steps into your shadow. He won't be perfect. He'll make mistakes. But he'll understand the rhythm, the silence, the strange peace in the work. And when people ask who trained him, he'll say your name. Not loudly. Not proudly. Just, plainly. Because that's what this job is. Not glory. Not shame. Just necessary. The morning is crisp, the kind of cold that numbs your fingers before you've even lifted a blade. You button your coat and reach for your gloves, soft leather, worn smooth from years of use. You're not dressing for war, but for presence. Because even your wardrobe tells a story. A lot of people think you wear black, head to toe, ominous and faceless, like the cartoon version of death. But in reality, your clothes are far more practical, and frankly, a bit theatrical in their own quiet way. Not flashy. Not drab. Somewhere in that sweet spot between official and approachable executioner, which is a stranger category than you'd think. Today you're in dark blue, your nicer tunic, brushed clean, with a long, sturdy coat cinched with a belt. The belt buckle is brass, etched with a symbol only a few in town would recognize. It's not mystical, it just marks you as a sworn officer of justice. Not unlike a badge. Funny how things come full circle. Your hood. Optional. You usually wear it down unless the event is especially formal, or especially tense. You find people respond better when they can see your face. Less monster, more man. The hood's mostly for tradition now. Or rain. You step into the back room, where your boots are drying near the fire. They're heavy, reinforced for standing long hours. You once tried softer shoes, but your ankles paid for it after a triple branding day. That was a long week. Historians have long debated whether executioners intentionally dressed to frighten or simply adopted practical wear that gradually gained mythic overtones. The long coat? Probably to protect from splatter and ash. The gloves? Both for grip and, let's be honest, social reasons. Not everyone wants to shake a hangman's bare hand after breakfast. You chuckle, remembering that one feast where a baron insisted you wear silk gloves to handle a ceremonial sword. You did. They tore within 5 minutes, and you went back to your usual pair. The baron didn't say a word. Probably realized silk doesn't hold up against iron and sweat. Now, when you look at your wardrobe, you see more than fabric. Each piece holds a memory. The green tunic with the frayed cuff? From the plague years. You wore it when you burned contaminated bedding outside the gates, working more like a garbage man than an executioner. That grey wool mantle with the silver trim? A gift from a duke who claimed you restored honor to his court by executing a treasonous knight. You weren't sure if he meant it, but the cloak was warm, and that winter was brutal. Then there's the ceremonial garb, used maybe twice a year, during major executions attended by nobility. It's black and crimson, lined with fur, with a stiff collar that makes it hard to turn your head. You hate it. Makes you look like a villain in a bad play. But tradition's tradition. Your apprentice eyes it once and asks, "Do we really need all this?" You grin. Only when there's an audience. Because yes, part of the job is showmanship. You are, in a strange way, part of the town's theater. Your presence on the square says, law is being carried out. Order is being restored. You may return to your barley soup shortly. It's not fashion for fashion's sake. It's part performance, part reassurance, part controlled fear. You're not supposed to look like a hero. You're not supposed to look like a criminal either. You're meant to look official, like a walking verdict. Still, you have preferences. You hate stiff collars. Prefer wool to linen in winter. And you've learned the hard way not to wear anything too flowing. You once tripped over a too long hem during a whipping. It didn't end badly, but you'll never live it down. The butcher still calls you Twinkle Toes when he's had too much ale. And pockets. Oh, the importance of pockets. You need them. For rope. For chalk. For a handkerchief. Once, for a tiny apple handed to you by a child who thought you looked hungry. You kept that apple all day, didn't have the heart to eat it. Dried it later, actually. Still in your chest. You examine your gloves again. You've tried different pairs over the years. Some too thick, some too slick. Eventually you settled on these, medium thickness, broken in. You know the feel of your tools through them. That matters. When you hold a sword, you need to feel it. Too little feedback, and your swing gets sloppy. Too much, and your hands blister. One time, your apprentice bought you a pair of embroidered gloves. Thought he was being kind. You thanked him, wore them once, and quietly returned to your old pair the next day. You didn't say anything. But he noticed. Your boots, too, have evolved. The first ones were hand-me-downs, stiff, cracked leather that chewed through your socks. Eventually, you had a cobbler craft you a custom pair. Steel toes, reinforced soles, stitched like armor. He called them justice shoes. You never corrected him. Kind of liked the ring to it. Sometimes, when you dress, you pause in front of the mirror, not out of vanity, but ritual. You check the seams. The stains. The alignment of your coat. You imagine the condemned seeing you, what their last impression might be. You want to look clean. Composed. Not like a monster. There's power in that. Not dominance, presence. The right clothes say, this is not chaos. This is order. They say, you may hate me, but you won't question the process. And that, in the end, is part of your strange peace. You're not hiding behind your wardrobe. You're supported by it. Armored, in a quiet way. You've had clothes ruined by blood, rain, tar, and on one memorable occasion, a goose. Don't ask. The important thing is, you've learned how to dress for anything. You fasten the last button on your coat. Adjust the belt. Pull on your gloves. And then you open the door and step into the gray morning, looking not like death, but like duty. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit like a man who knows exactly who he is. The weight of the axe in your hand is oddly comforting. It's not bloodthirsty or ominous, just familiar, like the heft of a good broom or the rhythm of your favorite walking stick. And despite what everyone assumes, you don't carry it everywhere. You don't sleep with it. You don't name it justice. It's a tool, one of many, and you use it only when needed, which, frankly, isn't all that often. Your workshop smells like oiled wood and iron. Light seeps through the warped shutters, falling in thin beams across a wall lined with your instruments. No, not those kinds of instruments. There's no rack of horrors here. Most of your tools wouldn't raise eyebrows in a carpenter's shop. A saw. A brace. A hammer. Only when you look closer do things get a little weird. There's the sword, of course. Broad, double-edged, nearly the length of your arm. Balanced like a dancer, because the last thing you want is to miss your mark. It's not flashy. Just sharp, honest steel. You sharpen it weekly, oil it nightly, and never loan it out, not even to the mayor when he wanted to display it for decorative purposes. You declined. Politely. Mostly. Next to it hangs a smaller axe, not for heads, but for limbs. You don't use it often, only when ordered. A thief with too many offenses, a corrupt scribe with light fingers and bad timing. You hate the axe more than the sword. Something about the jagged edges, the splashy violence. The sword is clean. This one is messy. Ropes hang in neat coils. Some are for restraint, others for hangings. You test the strength yourself. You've snapped too many ropes early in your career to ever trust them blindly. You even learned knotwork from a sailor once, who claimed his methods made the drop faster and more merciful. You tried it. It worked. You wrote it down in your little black book. And then there are the branding irons. Some shaped like letters, T for thief, F for fraud. Others just marks, symbols burned into flesh as a permanent public record. You hate these tools most of all. Not because they're violent, but because they linger. A sword ends a story. A brand writes shame into the skin for a lifetime. Sometimes the wound heals. Sometimes the soul never does. Historians still argue whether executioners truly created their own tools or inherited them from civic authorities. In your case, it's both. You inherited the big sword, but you had the branding irons custom forged. One of them has your initials near the handle, not because you wanted credit, but to distinguish it from a faulty copy once used by a careless apprentice. That copy burned wrong, uneven. You never forgave yourself for not double-checking first. There are stranger tools, too. A copper ladle used for boiling oil, rarely requested, thank goodness. A leather gag to prevent screaming during certain punishments. A jar of crushed herbs that dull pain when rubbed into wounds, though it doesn't help much. You once tried to give a condemned man a bit before execution, he refused it. Wanted to shout something to the crowd. You never found out what. The wind carried it off. A whip lies coiled in one corner. You don't like using it, but sometimes, it's the sentence. Floggings are loud, dramatic, and often draw bigger crowds than executions. People love drama more than finality, it seems. You've learned how to snap the whip with minimal injury when the judge gives you leeway. Sometimes you soften punishments without anyone realizing, just enough mercy to ease your conscience, not enough to lose your job. You keep a small trunk beneath the workbench. Inside are the quiet tools, needles, linen strips, salves. These aren't for the condemned. They're for after. For healing. Because sometimes a sentence ends, but the pain doesn't. And people come to you, discreetly, for help. A soldier with a half-healed wound. A midwife who saw too much. A thief who wants his brand cleaned before it festers. They trust you more than the barber surgeon. Maybe because you're quiet. Maybe because you don't ask questions. Or maybe because pain is something you understand all too well. You recall one strange day when you were summoned not to punish, but to prepare a body. A nobleman had died of plague, but they wanted him to look untouched before burial. You dressed him, cleaned the sores, tied the jaw shut. His wife thanked you. You never mentioned the fee. Just said it was part of your duty. And in a way, it was. Your apprentice eyes the wall of tools with barely concealed anxiety. You really use all of these? You shake your head. Most of them? Rarely. Some, not at all. Why keep them? Because one day, someone will ask for them. And I'd rather be ready. There's a story behind each one. The leather thong you used to restrain a frantic debtor who swore he was innocent. The iron cuff you had to repair after a nobleman broke it in a panic. The curved blade a traveling judge brought with him, used only once, too cruel to keep. You've buried some tools, too. One branding iron, shaped like a twisted snake, was ordered by a sadistic magistrate. You used it once. Then quietly tossed it in the river. No one ever asked about it again. Every so often, someone tries to take a souvenir, usually a drunk noble who thinks it's fun to swing your axe in the tavern. You stop that fast. These aren't toys. They carry weight, not just physical, but moral. When you touch them, you feel every story, every scream, every silent breath before the end. But they're not evil. They're instruments. You are the hand. And your job is not to enjoy the song, but to make sure it's played correctly. You close the workshop for the night, tools in order, blades oiled, rope coiled tight like a snake at rest. The room goes dark behind you, but you carry the tools in your mind. Each with its own feel. Its own history. You walk home quietly, the ghost of metal still clinging to your gloves. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll need the big sword. Maybe not. But tonight, the tools rest. And so do you. The knock comes before dawn. You recognize the rhythm, two sharp, one slow. It's the bailiff. You rub sleep from your eyes, swing your legs over the side of the bed, and grope for your coat. Your spouse stirs but doesn't speak. You've both lived with this rhythm for years. Downstairs, the fire's still glowing faintly. You throw on your boots, grab your pouch, and step outside into the mist. The bailiff hands you a scroll, sealed with red wax and already smudged from his gloved fingers. 2 sentences today, he says, voice low. Branding and stocks. You sigh. Public? He nods. Market Square. Mid-morning. Back inside, you light a candle and sit at your small desk, no more than a board nailed to the wall. There's a stack of parchment, a pot of ink, and your logbook. It's older than your apprentice and heavier than it looks. You crack it open and flip to the new page, writing slowly. Name, Gregor, son of Tomas. Crime, repeat theft. Sentence, branding, left shoulder. Date, 5th day of frost month. Location, Market Square. You dip your pen again, ink blobbing slightly. The second entry. Name, Anna of Elm Street. Crime, public disturbance. Sentence, 1 day in the stocks. Date, 5th day of frost month. Location, Market Square. Paperwork is as much a part of your job as the tools. Every punishment logged, every name written with care. You don't embellish. Just the facts. In time, these scrolls will be passed to the town scribe, who'll file them in the court records. Your handwriting, neat and plain, will survive far longer than your name ever will. You glance at the ink stains on your fingers. A different kind of blood. No less permanent. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly bureaucrats as well as blade-bearers. In your case, there's no debate. You handle the official records. You read judgments. You sometimes even act as a witness to testimony. You're more involved in the justice system than most people realize, and that includes calming crowds and keeping order. Your apprentice arrives as you're sharpening the branding iron. He sets down the coals, wrapped in thick cloth. Together, you get the fire going in the portable brazier. Soon, the iron begins to glow, faint red at first, then a pulsing orange. It hums softly in the still air, like it's remembering something. You check your tools again, methodical. Ropes, keys, hammer, ink pad, for thumbprints, a recent addition from a scribe who got very excited about physical verification. You smiled and nodded. You still prefer signatures when they're possible. You make your way to the square. The guards have already cleared a space. A small crowd gathers, pulling their cloaks tight against the chill. Someone's selling roasted chestnuts. The smell drifts over, earthy and sweet. You hear muttering. Some folks love these events. Others just want to be seen attending, makes them look dutiful. Gregor arrives first. Shackled, grimy, but not afraid. He's been here before. You nod to the guards. One holds him still while you clean the spot on his shoulder. Cold water. A cloth. You hold the branding iron aloft, not dramatically, but deliberately. The hiss when it touches skin is brief. He groans, clenches his fists, but doesn't scream. That's something. You press a clean cloth to the burn. The guard escorts him away. You note the time. Add a mark in your ledger. Next is Anna. She's trembling. Young, barely more than a girl. Her crime? Yelling obscenities at a town official. She's sentenced to the stocks. You've seen worse. Still, the stocks are humiliating. You unlock them gently, motion for her to kneel. She hesitates. You nod. She lowers herself, and you close the wooden frame around her wrists and neck. The click of the lock echoes louder than you'd like. She sniffles. You say nothing. By noon, the square is back to normal. The blacksmith is haggling over nails. A dog chases a pigeon near the well. You stay near the stocks, keeping watch. Some townsfolk throw insults. One tosses a soft pear that bounces harmlessly off the wood. You scowl. The crowd quiets. Public punishment is less about pain and more about example. You're not just executing sentences, you're executing authority. A performance of order. Everyone must see that the law is not just words on parchment. It has hands. And feet. And sometimes, your face. You write a few final notes in your log as the sun begins to sink. You help Anna out of the stocks, gently. Her neck is sore, wrists reddened. You hand her a cup of water. She doesn't thank you. That's fine. You don't expect it. That evening, back at home, you spread your scrolls to dry. The ink has curled the edges of the parchment. Your spouse brings you soup, cabbage and barley. You eat in silence, the day still clinging to your shoulders. Later, as you clean your tools, a knock comes. It's the mayor's assistant. Apparently, there's a dispute about a boundary stone, and someone has requested you mediate. You blink. Me? They say you're neutral. And that you listen. That's not the first time someone said that. Your reputation, oddly enough, has become one of calm fairness. You don't speak unless necessary. You ask good questions. You remember names. And you don't have any political ties. You're the perfect unofficial judge. You nod and say you'll come tomorrow. After all, it's not the strangest task you've been given. Before bed, you make one last log entry. Note, branding iron tip may be slightly misaligned. Needs adjustment before next use. Then you close the book. Blow out the candle. The town sleeps, knowing that the law is more than parchment. It has a voice. It has a rhythm. It has someone like you, who keeps it all from falling apart. And you? You just call it Tuesday. You sit under the eaves of your modest house, sharpening your smallest blade with slow, deliberate strokes. The grindstone hisses softly in rhythm. Not for spectacle. Not for fear. Just habit. You find it calming, the rasp of steel against stone, the simple promise that something blunt can become precise again. Behind you, the church bell tolls. Not for a death today, but for prayer. The sound drifts lazily through the air like incense. You glance up at the clouds. Gray and stretched thin, like old wool. You suspect rain's on its way. You've been thinking a lot about mercy lately. Not the dramatic kind, with sobbing pardons and divine revelations, but the quiet sort. The kind that seeps in between duty and doubt. A monk visited you last week. A serious man, balding, with sharp eyes and a soft voice. He came to speak on behalf of a condemned man scheduled for hanging. Theft again, but from a church pantry this time. He was feeding his family, the monk said. Surely there must be an alternative. You listened. You always do. And then you gave the same answer you always give: the sentence is not mine to decide. Only to carry out. But this time, the monk didn't leave right away. He lingered. Asked questions. Deep ones. What you thought about justice. Whether you believed in salvation. Whether your soul trembled when you lifted your sword. You didn't answer immediately. Instead, you poured him a cup of spiced cider and stared into the hearth fire. I think, you said finally, that if God didn't want me to do this work, he wouldn't have made me so steady with a blade. The monk didn't laugh. Just nodded solemnly and said, a fair answer. But be careful you don't mistake steadiness for righteousness. That one stuck with you. Historians still argue whether executioners were driven by belief, duty, or survival. You know the truth is usually a mix of all three. You don't enjoy the work. But you believe in rules. You believe that order matters. And if someone has to be the last hand in the chain of law, better that it's a steady one. Still, the monk's visit stirred something. You find yourself hesitating more often. Not long pauses, nothing that delays the sentence, but little things. A longer look. A quiet question. Are you ready, you'll ask, and sometimes you mean more than the literal. Some say executioners had no soul. Others believed you carried the weight of the town's sins. You've heard both. Neither sits quite right. You don't feel soulless. But you do feel heavy sometimes, like your body remembers every swing of the blade, even if your mind tries not to. There was one case, years ago, that still crawls into your dreams. A boy, barely a man, sentenced to death for assaulting a noble's son. You knew the truth was murky. Witnesses recanted. The noble's son had a reputation. But the order came anyway. And you carried it out. Cleanly. Swiftly. But not without doubt. Afterwards, you sat by the river for hours. Just listening. Not to anything in particular, just listening, as if the water might whisper a reason back to you. It didn't. It never does. Your apprentice asks you one evening, do you ever feel bad? You pause. Not from surprise, but from the care he puts into the question. Yes, you say. But I don't feel wrong. Is there a difference? Sometimes. Sometimes not. He goes quiet after that. You don't blame him. It's a lot to carry. You remember a festival once, springtime, flowers everywhere, music, too much wine. Someone recognized you, pulled you into a circle of dancers. You spun once, twice, laughed, then stopped when you saw a child staring at your hands. You wore no gloves that day. Just bare skin. The child tugged their mother's sleeve. Is that the man who kills people? You didn't stay much longer after that. But here's the strange thing, you're still invited to weddings. People still ask you to bless new homes, to whisper prayers at births. Some think you're cursed. Others think you're closer to God because you see the end more clearly. You don't know which is truer. One older woman once pressed a coin into your palm and said, "You're the last kindness they'll know." You didn't ask for that weight. But you carry it all the same. There are moments, though, that surprise you. Like the young woman who came to thank you for executing her abusive husband. Or the farmer who brought you a chicken in exchange for a clean job on his cousin, who'd been condemned for treason. You declined the chicken. He left it anyway. You cooked it. It was dry. There are days when you doubt everything. When the sword feels heavier. When the rope coils like a question mark. On those days, you visit the graveyard. Not for the people you've executed, you rarely know where they're buried, but for the peace. You sit among the stones, read the names, and remember that everyone ends somewhere. Sometimes, you whisper your own name. Just to hear it out loud. And yet, for all the weight, there's something oddly peaceful in your role. You're not cruel. You don't punish. You complete. You finish what began with laws and judges and scribes. You are the period at the end of a long, bitter sentence. And while you'll never be praised for your work, never be remembered in ballads, there is still a strange, solemn kind of pride in knowing you've done it with precision, with dignity, and, as often as possible, with mercy. Your boots sink slightly into the soft dirt of your back garden. The rain from last night soaked the earth, and now everything smells green and clean. You inhale the scent of thyme and damp wood and something else, fresh bread wafting from the neighbor's kitchen. This is your other life. When you're not tending to matters of law, you're out here among the herbs, the chickens, the stacks of firewood, and, on occasion, a small barrel of fermented apples you call cider, even though everyone knows it's a little stronger than that. You like it that way. Keeps visitors honest. Your day off, if you can call it that, begins with chores. You're mending a fence where the goats got too curious last week. One of them, a brown speckled one you named Priest, keeps trying to eat your tunic laces. You swat him gently with a branch and mutter something about divine mischief. It surprises most people that you live like this, gardening, brewing, even dabbling in minor surgery. But the job doesn't pay in gold bars. You've got to supplement your income somehow, and besides, it's good for the soul. There's a comfort in hands-on work that doesn't involve sentencing. You grow sage, nettle, chamomile, and even a little mandrake. People pay well for mandrake, especially when you tell them it screams. It doesn't, not really. But a little theatricality helps business. In the evenings, folks drop by. They knock on your back door, not your front, always discreet. Sometimes it's a toothache. Sometimes a boil. Occasionally, it's just someone looking for a poultice for their cow. You're not a physician, but in a town this size, you're close enough. You once removed a splinter the size of a hairpin from the mayor's big toe. He swore you saved his life. You didn't argue. A grateful mayor is a good mayor. Your apprentice watches all this with mild awe. You're kind of like a healer, he says one afternoon as you're grinding dried nettles into powder. You shrug. Or a hedge witch. Or an unlicensed barber. Depends who you ask. You hand him a jar. Take this to the baker. His wife's got the cough again. He hesitates. Won't people wonder why I'm delivering herbs? They'll assume you're learning a trade. Which you are. He nods, tucks the jar into his satchel, and heads off. Historians still debate whether executioners were allowed to live fully integrated lives or forced to the fringes of society. The evidence is mixed. Some executioners were feared and isolated, others ran side businesses, served as unofficial healers, and even delivered babies. You lean toward the latter. People need you more than they want to admit. You once stitched up a stable boy who'd sliced his leg on a rusted horseshoe. He came back 3 months later with a sack of onions and a hand-drawn, "Thank you" note that's still tacked to your wall. You keep it next to the herbal recipes and a sketch your daughter made of you holding a very wobbly sword. Her version includes a smiling sun and a dog that looks more like a sheep, but you cherish it all the same. You don't tell everyone about your side work. Some still think you're cursed. One woman refuses to drink from your well, convinced your profession taints the water. But others, quietly, thankfully, come to you when they need something real. Not legal. Not public. Just human. Your cider sells well at market. You don't label it. People just know. They call it the calm bottle. It's got a kick and a slow burn, but it's clean, and that's what matters. Like your sword. Sometimes, during festival days, you even judge pie contests. Officially, you're there as a community representative. Unofficially, everyone knows you have a sweet tooth and a very strict sense of fairness. You once disqualified the mayor's cousin for using store-bought crust. He hasn't spoken to you since. You consider that a bonus. You're also good with animals. There's a stray dog that follows you sometimes, a black mutt with one ear and a limp. You named him Trial. He doesn't belong to anyone, but he always seems to know when something's about to happen. Execution days, he stays closer. Almost like he's standing guard. One afternoon, you're called to assist with a calving. The farmer says his wife insisted you come, said you have a quietness animals trust. You do, apparently. The calf is born just before sunset, slippery and bleeding. You wipe your hands on your tunic, accept a wheel of cheese as payment, and go home smelling of hay and new life. That night, you sleep better than you have all week. And then there are the strange requests. Someone once asked you to bless their house after a miscarriage. Another asked you to cut down a tree that was full of bad luck. One old man brought you a jar of rainwater and asked you to whisper a name into it before he buried it in his garden. You didn't ask why. You just did it. There's a tenderness to your days off. No crowds. No sentences. Just soft wind through grass, the hiss of herbs in boiling water, and the occasional hiccup from your apprentice when he tastes the cider too soon. At the end of one long afternoon, you and your apprentice sit near the fire, carving small wooden animals. It's not practice. Just pastime. He makes a rabbit. You make a fox. Neither looks particularly convincing, but it's good work for the hands. You ever think about leaving? He asks. You consider it. Sometimes. But I'd miss the garden. And the cider. He grins. And Trial? Especially Trial. Because this life, your real life, isn't just about endings. It's full of growing things. Healing things. Quiet moments. And in those moments, you're not the executioner. You're just the neighbor with the best cider and the steadiest hands in town. It starts with a tap on your shoulder. You're in the market square, examining a basket of early pears when a hand brushes your sleeve. You turn slowly, old habit, and find a young woman staring up at you like she's unsure whether to speak or run. Are you him? She whispers. The executioner? There it is. No title, no name, just him. You nod, and her face flushes a deep pink. She stammers, "My father said you saved my uncle's life once." You raise an eyebrow. How's that? He was sentenced. Years ago. You spoke to the judge. Said he was too weak to stand. That maybe he deserved mercy. You remember. Vaguely. A frail man, skin hanging loose on brittle bones, accused of something petty, breaking curfew during plague restrictions. You'd spoken up, quietly, carefully. The judge had relented. Gave the man a fine and a week in the stocks instead. You'd even brought him water during his punishment. I just wanted to say thank you, she says, hands twisting in her apron. We don't forget. You nod again, and she hurries off. Just like that, you're left with a pear in one hand and a quiet thud in your chest. This is the part no one writes about. The odd, unplanned moments of fame. You're not a celebrity. You're not even particularly well liked. But you are known. The blacksmith waves you over for lunch. His forge hisses behind him, and he hands you a hunk of bread and a wedge of cheese without asking. You sit under his awning and eat in companionable silence. When a stranger passes, they glance twice, once at him, once at you. Then they whisper. It happens more and more lately. At the tavern, you hear your name spoken in corners. He's the one who executed that noble who kicked the stable boy. Or, didn't he stop that thief from bleeding to death after the branding? The tales swirl, and most of them are wrong. But some hit close enough to make your ears warm. Your apprentice teases you, you're a legend now. Want me to start charging for autographs? You roll your eyes. I'm already overpriced. Still, the attention isn't always flattering. You've had your share of side eyes and muttered prayers. One man refused to serve you ale, said your presence soured the drink. Another refused to sit beside you in church, moving 3 benches away with theatrical sighs. You didn't argue. Some hearts are small. You've learned to live around them. Yet, there are others who pull you into their lives in surprising ways. A playwright once asked you to consult on a stage scene involving a mock execution. You agreed, after all, accuracy matters. You advised him on posture, on how to hold the blade, on what people expect to see. When opening night came, you stood in the back of the crowd, arms folded, watching the audience gasp at every detail you'd fine-tuned. It was oddly satisfying. You've also become the reluctant confidant of half the town. People assume you know things. That you can keep secrets. That you're already carrying so many, what's one more? A merchant tells you his wife is having an affair. A stable hand asks whether a stolen ring can be returned anonymously. Even the mayor once pulled you aside to ask how much wine he could bribe a bishop with before it became suspicious. You listen. You nod. You rarely offer advice, but your silence is its own kind of permission. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly feared or respected by their communities. Some writings describe them as ghost-like figures, shunned and avoided. Others paint them as indispensable fixtures, practical, if uncomfortable. You lean toward the latter. You've sat at more weddings than funerals. You've held babies, mended fences, and even sung in the festival choir once. Badly, yes, but you were on key. One of your favorite regulars is the baker's boy. He follows you like a shadow, always with 1,000 questions. What does a rope feel like before it breaks? Have you ever chopped a tree the same way you know? Do you ever get bored? To that last one, you answered honestly, every day. But boredom means I'm not ending anyone's life. So I welcome it. You're not proud of what you do. But you are proud of how you do it. With care. With restraint. With no unnecessary cruelty. That's why people come to you for favors. Not the dangerous kind. The delicate ones. Quiet deliveries. A message slipped to a prisoner. A prayer whispered before a sentence, even if they've been excommunicated. You remember one man, older, blind in one eye, who gripped your arm just before his hanging. Don't let my daughter watch, he begged. She's just a child. You spoke to the guards. Sent her away under the pretense of a sick horse. She never knew. She still sends you dried herbs every spring. You've never told her why. People trust you in odd ways. A seamstress once asked you to bless her thread so her stitches wouldn't trap spirits. You laughed. Did it anyway. Her cloak still hangs in your closet. There's even a yearly ritual now, quiet, unofficial, where townsfolk leave small offerings on your doorstep. A pair of gloves. A loaf of honeyed bread. A tiny carved dove. No notes. No names. Just things. It's not celebration. It's not forgiveness either. It's recognition. You exist in the spaces between fear and familiarity. You're the quiet man at the edge of the square. The one who carries out justice but returns your lost cat. The one who knows your secrets but never speaks of them. And in this strange balance, you find peace. Not applause. Not fame. But peace. A life lived visibly, yet in shadows. The town square is already humming by the time you arrive. Merchants are shouting prices, hens are flapping in woven cages, and children dart between legs like half-tamed foxes. You've walked this square in silence, in ceremony, in the solemn grip of execution, but today, you're here for something else. Punishment. Not the fatal kind. Not today. Your presence still hushes the air a little. Conversations dip, glances flicker, and the tomato seller at the edge of the square suddenly becomes very interested in rearranging her produce. You ignore it. You've long since stopped feeling awkward about these quiet ripples. They're part of the work. Today's sentence is for a thief, not a clever one. He tried to steal from the almoner's wagon in broad daylight, then tripped over his own feet while running. Caught, cuffed, and now awaiting judgment from a less than sympathetic magistrate. He's been sentenced to lose an ear. Yes, you heard that right. An ear. It's rare these days. But still legal. Still in the books. And still, unfortunately, your responsibility. You pass the constable near the well. He gives a short nod and gestures toward the platform. It's already set up, a small stool, a wash basin, a cloth for blood. Efficient. You appreciate that. Your tools are laid out on a small wooden board beside it. No grand axe today. Just a short, curved knife. Sharp as truth. You tested it this morning on a strip of pork rind. It sliced like it had something to prove. Your apprentice stands nearby, watching closely. He knows this part is harder than it looks. The aim isn't to cause pain, though it comes anyway, but to do the job quickly, precisely, without mutilation or drama. Theater is for executions. This is about demonstration. The thief is led forward. A boy, really? Maybe 16. Already trembling. You catch his eyes and hold them. You understand what's about to happen, you ask, voice low enough for only him to hear. He nods, throat dry. Hold still, and it will be fast. He nods again. You steady his head with one hand. The other grips the knife. One swift motion. The crowd gasps. The ear drops into the basin with a wet thud. You press a cloth to the wound immediately, binding it quickly with linen soaked in vinegar and herbs. He doesn't scream. He winces. But he doesn't scream. It's done in seconds. The thief is taken away. He'll live. Scarred, sure. Shamed, definitely. But alive. And that's the thing most people forget, you don't just execute. You punish. Often, you correct. A lash, a mark, a moment of pain to reset a pattern of wrong choices. You're less reaper and more reset button. Historians still debate how often non-lethal punishments like branding, flogging, and mutilation were used versus execution. The records are scattered. Some towns favored severe but survivable sentences, others went straight for the noose. Your town falls somewhere in the middle. Justice here likes to leave a visible message, but one that can still sit down to dinner afterward. You've handled it all. Brandings for thieves. Whippings for slander. Shaming for adulterers, though that one's awkward. You once had to stand next to a married couple, both accused of infidelity, and publicly read their love letters aloud. You barely made it through. Your apprentice still mocks your dramatic reading voice. And then, of course, there are the stocks. Anna of Elm Street, remember her? She's become something of a stock veteran. Every few months, she mouths off to the wrong official and ends up with her head and hands locked in public woodwork. At this point, the townspeople bring her snacks. One time, she crocheted a scarf while imprisoned. You had to double-check that wasn't a loophole in the sentence. The stocks humiliate more than they hurt. But they do serve a purpose. Public embarrassment can sting longer than a blade. You've seen men weep after an hour in them, their pride bleeding more than their wrists. Your role in these punishments is different than with executions. You're not the final moment, you're the middle. The enforcer. The reminder. You carry out the court's orders, and you do it with the same care and silence as you would a sword swing. And sometimes, after the pain fades, people come to thank you. A branded thief once returned to you months later. He rolled up his sleeve and showed the scar, a T, still faintly red. He said, "That stopped me. I was going too far. It pulled me back." You didn't say anything. But you gave him a nod. And a small jar of salve for the scar. You've also dealt with nobles. Oh yes, they aren't above it, no matter what they claim. Public shaming for misused funds, restricted movement for violating quarantine, even ceremonial floggings where you're instructed to barely tap them for the appearance of discipline. Your apprentice once asked, "Doesn't that make a mockery of justice?" You shrugged. Sometimes justice is about theater. And sometimes the theater's the only part they notice. You remember a time when a drunk knight insulted a visiting dignitary. The mayor ordered a symbolic flogging, 3 lashes, barely wrist snaps. The knight strutted around like a martyr for days afterward. But the crowd saw it. Saw that no one was immune. That mattered more than the pain. Sometimes, you worry the lines get blurred. That spectacle wins over fairness. But you do what you can to keep the balance. If it must be done, at least let it be done well. And when your job is done, you step away. Quietly. No bows. No speeches. You pack your tools, wash your hands, and disappear into the crowd like a ghost in a good coat. That evening, your apprentice brings you dinner, stew and a heel of bread. He sets it on the table and says, "You're the only person I know who can take someone's ear off and still be called gentle." You smile. Better gentle than sloppy. He laughs. Remind me not to whisper in court. Because here, in this strange, structured world of punishments not quite death, you walk a thin line. You wield pain, but not cruelty. Order, but not tyranny. And as odd as it sounds, people trust you more because of it. They've seen the blade. They've seen the brand. And they've seen the hand behind both isn't angry, or proud, or bloodthirsty. Just steady. It's early morning, and your daughter is arguing with your apprentice about cheese. Not the finer points of its flavor or texture, just whether the wheel on the shelf is yours or his. You settle it by pointing out, without looking up from your notes, that neither of them bought it, and therefore it probably belongs to your spouse, who will not be pleased if it's gone before supper. This is life at home. A little chaotic, a little odd, but surprisingly normal. People think an executioner's family must live in some crooked cottage at the edge of the woods, shunned and shadowed like something from a grim folktale. The truth? You live in a 3-room stone house just off the main road, near the tannery, close enough to hear the town bell and smell the morning bread. You've got a garden, a hearth, and a mismatched set of chairs that you've been meaning to repair for 6 winters now. There's a stain on the ceiling from a long-ago leak, and your son has carved his name into the table leg despite denying it every single time. It's home. And like everything else you care about, it's simple, practical, and full of stories. Your spouse is the backbone of it all. Quiet, perceptive, and the only person in town who can outstare you when you get too serious. They run the household with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue when needed, managing food, children, and whatever peculiar favor someone has asked of you that day. You've been together long enough that words are sometimes optional. A glance. A shrug. A nod. That's all it takes. People often ask, when they're brave enough, how someone like you ends up with a family. As though violence precludes love. You usually say, same way anyone does, poor judgment and good timing. But the real answer is simpler, you're a person. A human being. You just happen to carry a sword at work. Your children know what you do. Not the full details, not at first, but you've never hidden it. When they were little, you said you helped keep order. As they got older, the words sharpened. I carry out punishments. I enforce the law. Yes, sometimes that means I take lives. They took it better than you expected. Children are odd that way. Sometimes the truth sits more easily in their hands than in yours. Your daughter once asked, do they cry? Sometimes, you said. Do you? You were honest. Not often. But I remember. She nodded like that made perfect sense, then went back to braiding her doll's hair. Historians rarely write about executioners' families. You're a footnote, if that. A mysterious figure, no past, no attachments. But that's nonsense. You shop at the market. You fix your roof. You kiss your spouse's cheek before bed. You argue about firewood and whose turn it is to patch the goat pen. There are challenges, of course. Other children don't always want to play with yours. At school, your son was called Butcher Boy more than once. Your daughter once came home crying because a boy at the well said your house was haunted. You confronted neither child nor parent. You simply walked past their house a little more often that month. After that, the whispers died down. Funny how presence alone can do what a sword never needs to. There's a story you keep close, one you never wrote in your logbook. It was years ago, before your youngest was born. A woman came to your door, pregnant and afraid. Her husband had been executed, by you, no less. She had nowhere to go. No one to vouch for her. You offered her a place by the hearth for the night. She stayed for 6 months. Helped your spouse with the herbs. Helped your children with their letters. When she left, she hugged you and said, you killed my past, but you gave me back a future. You never forgot that. Your apprentice once asked, what happens if someone tries to hurt your family? You looked him straight in the eyes. Then I become something the town hasn't seen before. And won't see again. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. But truthfully, you rarely need to defend them. The town, odd as it is, protects its own. You've become something of a figure, uncomfortable to some, yes, but woven into the fabric all the same. Your children grow up knowing they are watched, whispered about, and strangely respected. You celebrate birthdays with honey cakes and cider. You sing songs by the fire, off-key and loud. You tell stories, never about executions, but about stars and foxes and clever girls who outwit kings. Your spouse reads while knitting. Your apprentice carves figurines from leftover wood. And in the quiet moments, you sometimes wonder if this fragile, lovely routine, is more shocking than anything you've ever done in the square. One winter night, you come home to find a small doll left on your doorstep. It wears a tiny black cloak and holds a toothpick sword. No note. Just the doll. Your daughter thinks it's funny. Your apprentice calls it nightmare miniature. You place it on the mantel, where it still sits, tiny and fearless. And in those moments, surrounded by laughter, by firelight, by mismatched chairs and bickering over cheese, you remember why you do it all. Not for fear. Not for gold. But for peace. For order. For the chance to come home, hang up your coat, and hear your child ask, "Did you bring any pears?" And maybe, just maybe, for the tiniest black-cloaked doll in the world watching over your hearth. The sky is unusually clear today, blue stretching from rooftop to rooftop, with just a few lazy clouds drifting like geese that forgot where they were going. A perfect day for market, or baking, or maybe a quiet walk down by the river. Unfortunately, it's also a perfect day for a riot. It starts small, as these things tend to, an argument between a butcher and a traveling peddler over a faulty scale. Then another merchant jumps in. Then someone throws a turnip, and just like that, the whole square seems to lurch from mildly annoyed to moderately enraged. You hear it before you see it. Raised voices, the unmistakable sound of wood striking stone, the panic of people trying to be both spectators and escapees at once. Your apprentice bursts through your door, breathless. Crowds turning ugly, he gasps. They want you in the square. You sigh, pick up your coat, and grab the staff leaning against the wall. No sword today. Not unless absolutely necessary. You're not there to punish. You're there to calm. And like it or not, your face does that, because people know what happens when your face shows up after things get worse. The square is boiling over when you arrive. The stocks have been tipped, a fruit cart lies on its side, and two men are shouting nose to nose about tax rates like they invented economics just this morning. You step into the crowd. No dramatic entrance. Just boots on stone. A few people notice. Then a few more. Like ripples in a pond, silence starts to spread. You don't speak immediately. You just look. One of the arguing men, thin, red-faced, holding a fistful of onion, meets your eyes and suddenly finds his shoes very interesting. A nearby woman clutches her child's hand and gently pulls him behind her skirt. You take one slow breath and raise your hand, not to strike, just to gesture for quiet. It works. Mostly. A boy throws a stone. It misses. Barely. Your apprentice lunges for him, but you wave him off. Instead, you walk slowly to where the stone landed. Pick it up. Turn it over in your hand. Then you look back at the boy, no more than 12. He's frozen. You say, calmly, if you throw something again, make sure it's worth dying over. He nods, eyes wide, and vanishes into the crowd like a squirrel spotting a hawk. That's the thing about public presence. It's not about muscle. It's about meaning. You represent the full weight of consequence, walking calmly through a sea of maybe regret. Historians still argue whether executioners acted as enforcers beyond the scaffold, peacekeepers, bailiffs, even mediators. In your town, you wear all these hats. Sometimes literally. You once had to wear a red cap while officiating a grain measure dispute. It made you look like a festive beat, but rules are rules. The constable finds you by the well. He's flustered, breathing hard. They're arguing about the new tax. Merchants say it's unfair. Farmers say it's not high enough. Everyone thinks someone else is cheating. You nod. Have they hit each other yet? He hesitates. Only lightly. You suppress a sigh. Right. I'll handle it. And you do. You start with the loudest. Always the loudest. You pull aside the butcher and the peddler, sit them at a splintered bench, and make them explain the issue, twice, calmly, under your very patient gaze. Turns out, the scale was tampered with. By the peddler's apprentice. You fine him 3 coppers and send him to clean the latrines as restitution. The butcher accepts this with a scowl, but no further onions are thrown. The rest of the crowd simmers down. Slowly. You speak to a few key voices. Ask simple questions. Let them vent, then listen. People want to be heard more than they want to fight. And when they know you're listening, that your ear is sharper than your blade, they start to behave. Later, as you walk home, your apprentice shakes his head. How do you do that? No shouting, no swinging, just standing there. You smile. That's the job. He frowns. I thought the job was, execution. That's part of it, you say. But the real job is keeping things from reaching that point. People think you're the end. But often, you're the barrier between a bad day and a worse one. You remember one autumn when a noble's caravan came through and tried to seize lodging from local families. The crowd gathered quickly. Pitchforks and all. You stood between them and the soldiers, unarmed, but not unnoticed. You didn't have to speak. Just stood there, arms folded, eyebrows raised. The soldiers backed down. The noble left without incident. You slept well that night. And then there are the hecklers. Oh, the hecklers. You've heard it all. Murderer. Dog of the devil. You'll swing next. You don't flinch anymore. If anything, you've developed a sarcastic inner monologue just to survive it. One man once shouted, "Hope someone takes your head one day." You turned, smiled, and said, "I'll leave you a list of qualified replacements." He went quiet. Another time, someone hurled a tomato at your chest. Your apprentice caught it mid-air and took a bow. You bought him a pastry for that. Still, the crowd can turn ugly fast. Too fast. You've seen it happen. A missed swing. A botched sentence. A wrongly accused prisoner. The people want blood, but often they don't care whose. That's why you train for calm. For stillness. Because when the crowd sees you panic, chaos takes the reins. And yet, in the quieter corners, you're respected. Not openly. Not warmly. But undeniably. A mother once asked you to walk her daughter home after a festival. "I know no one would dare touch her if you're nearby," she said. You didn't wear your coat. Just walked silently beside the girl, who asked you about stars the entire way. You answered as best you could. Because even in the riot, even in the roar of the crowd, your job is to be the still point. The eye in the storm. The reminder that law is not a shout, it's a whisper spoken clearly by someone who means it. And tonight, as the square settles and the carts are righted and the bruises are already blooming, people look toward your door and know. You didn't strike today. You didn't need to. And that, somehow, is more terrifying than anything. The square is quieter than usual this morning. Even the chickens seem subdued, their clucking replaced by an uneasy stillness that settles in your bones like fog. Execution days have a rhythm all their own, slow, heavy, almost reverent in the way a storm gathers. People speak in softer tones, even when they pretend they're not interested. But of course they're interested. Everyone is. You arrive early, as always. The scaffold's already assembled, wood slightly damp from last night's rain, creaking with the weight of anticipation. You check the steps, the ropes, the crossbeam. You test the trapdoor mechanism with your boot. Satisfying click. No splinters today, hopefully. Your apprentice is there, setting up the table of tools with the kind of care you once thought impossible for someone so young. He doesn't speak. Neither do you. There's no need. It's all been done before. The priest arrives next, robes fluttering slightly in the breeze. He offers a quick nod, and you return it. You've worked together many times now. You know when to speak and when to let silence carry its own weight. The condemned will be brought soon. Today's sentence is hanging. A stable hand who killed a merchant during a drunken brawl. There's no dispute over guilt. No appeal. But still, there's a weight to it. He's young. Not so different from your apprentice, in fact. That's always the hardest part. You feel the crowd gathering before you see them. The air shifts. Boots on stone. The hush of breath being held. The occasional cough, louder than it should be. You step aside as the guards bring the prisoner up the scaffold. He stumbles a bit. You catch his elbow, steady him, and guide him to the marked spot. He doesn't resist. His hands tremble, but his jaw is set. You tie the rope with practiced hands. Adjust the knot just behind his left ear, for a faster drop, a cleaner break. There's an art to this, though no one likes to admit it. Historians still argue whether executioners saw themselves as artists of death or simply practitioners of necessity. You lean toward the latter, though on days like this, when everything must go just right, it feels like both. The priest speaks softly, reading from the Psalms. The condemned man mumbles something, too low to hear. You place the noose gently over his head. Any last words, you ask, low and calm. He swallows hard. Tell my brother, the coins are under the floorboard. You nod. That's all. Then you step back. The lever clicks. And the crowd exhales. It's done. No flailing. No delay. Just the final moment of quiet before the world starts turning again. You check for signs of life. There are none. You give the nod. The priest offers a final prayer. The guards step forward. The crowd begins to murmur again, volume rising like a tide now that the moment has passed. The performance is over. Because that's what it is, in many ways, a performance. A grim theater, staged for the people. They expect you to be solemn but efficient. Firm but merciful. You must carry out the law while reminding them it's still law, not vengeance. That matters more than they know. You once botched a swing. It haunts you. Not because of the gore, though there was plenty, but because the crowd gasped, and in that moment, the illusion cracked. The mask of order slipped, and what they saw was mess, pain, doubt. You fixed it quickly, cleanly, but the moment hung in the air for days. Even the butcher avoided eye contact for a week. You never made that mistake again. People expect a certain cadence to these events. The crowd arrives in solemn curiosity. The priest reads. The condemned speaks. The blade swings or the trap opens. Justice is done. Applause is rare, only the truly callous ever cheer, but there's a collective sigh, a ripple of understanding. The rules still apply. The balance still holds. Once, during a particularly high-profile execution, a noble, executed for treason, you were asked to wear ceremonial garb. Crimson and black, velvet trim, ridiculous shoulder padding. You looked like a sad jester at a funeral. But the crowd needed the pageantry. Needed to believe that even nobility could fall, and fall with spectacle. Your apprentice called it the peacock suit. You have never forgiven him. Still, the role you play is real, even if the robes are absurd. You bring not just death, but closure. People leave these gatherings with a sense of reset. The scales of justice feel balanced again, if only for a day. Sometimes, after an execution, someone will linger. A mother. A friend. A brother. They'll ask questions. Did he suffer? No. Did he say anything? You share what you can. Sometimes it's a lie. Sometimes it's mercy. One woman once pressed a piece of cake into your hand. His favorite, she said. I thought you should have it. You didn't eat it. But you kept it for 3 days before burying it near the tree by your garden. You think about that now, as the crowd begins to disperse. The scaffold creaks in the wind. The bloodless ending has left the crowd satisfied. No one shouts. No one weeps. That's rare. Your apprentice helps you disassemble the gear. The rope is coiled. The lever locked. The wood checked for splinters. Routine is comforting. You clean your hands with vinegar and lemon balm. On the way back to your home, a man stops you. Middle-aged, weather-worn. "You're not what I expected," he says. You glance at him. "What were you expecting?" He shrugs. "More fury. Less care." You smile faintly. It's easier to swing a sword in anger. It's harder to do it with love. He stares at you for a moment, nods, then moves on. That night, you sit by the fire. Your apprentice stares into the flames, quiet. "He was young," he says finally. "Yes. Did it feel different?" You consider that. They all feel different. And all the same. He nods, processing it. Execution is many things. Punishment. Warning. Ritual. But above all, it's a moment of transformation. One life ends. Others continue. And you, forever caught in between, stand on the threshold. Not to revel. Not to judge. Just to carry it through. And that, today, is enough. The cold comes early this year. The kind that bites through your gloves and slips into the cracks behind your knees when you stand too long. You roll your shoulders against it, trying to shake the stiffness from your spine as you oil the blade you used last week. A clean swing. Cleanest in months. You should feel satisfied. But something's been sitting on your chest ever since. It wasn't the sentence itself. The man was guilty, no question. A merchant who'd beaten his servant girl to death. Witnesses, bruises, confession. The town demanded justice, and they got it. You gave it to them. Swift, precise, without fanfare. But the moment before the swing, he looked at you. Not with hate. Not with fear. With understanding. As if he knew exactly what was coming and why. As if he agreed with it. And somehow, that's worse. Your apprentice noticed. He always does. "Something wrong?" he asked afterward, as you cleaned the platform. You didn't answer. You couldn't find the words. Still can't. You've misjudged before. Not the sentence, you don't make those. But the moment. The rhythm. The readiness. Sometimes the condemned aren't ready, and sometimes, you aren't either. And then, sometimes, you make a mistake. There was the man whose final request you forgot to honor. He'd asked for a hymn, quiet, simple, the one his mother sang when he was sick. You meant to ask the priest. You meant to pause. But the crowd was tense, the guards were rushing, and the rope was already pulled tight before you remembered. You said nothing. Just stood there as the body hung and the wind howled softly. You told the priest later. He nodded. God understands. You're not sure you do. Historians don't talk about this part. They write about executions as data points, numbers, dates, methods. They rarely mention the times things don't go according to plan. A dull blade. A frayed rope. A prisoner who twists at the last second. You've seen it all. You've done it all. And each mistake has a ghost attached. You remember one hanging where the drop wasn't long enough. His neck didn't break. He kicked for too long. The crowd grew restless. Angry. Someone shouted. You wanted to cover your ears. Instead, you walked up the steps and pulled the lever again. It didn't help. The body still writhed. You ended it with your knife. Afterward, the magistrate said, "Well handled." You nodded and vomited behind the chapel. There's a myth that executioners don't feel. That your hearts are sheathed in iron, like your blades. But the truth? It wears on you. The repetition, the precision, the constant mental note of how much force it takes to separate flesh and bone. Sometimes, late at night, you hear it. Not screams, just the silence before them. The final breath. The waiting. That's the part that stays. Your apprentice finds you by the river, polishing the branding irons. He watches for a moment before sitting beside you. "I keep thinking about that girl," he says. "The one we branded last spring. The one who stole bread." You nod, still polishing. She smiled after. Said thank you. She was grateful it wasn't worse. But shouldn't it feel worse? That we hurt her and she thanked us? You pause. The iron is warm from the sun. You set it down. She was thanking the system, you say. Because it gave her a path back. She gets to live. She gets to work. She doesn't vanish into a cell. That brand means, still part of us. He shakes his head. It still feels wrong. You don't argue. You don't want to argue. Because he's right. It is wrong. But it's also necessary. Like cauterizing a wound. Brutal, but cleansing. And sometimes, things just go wrong. You once executed a man who, it turned out, had been wrongly accused. A last-minute confession from the real killer came a week later. You remember staring at your hands afterward, like they belonged to someone else. You couldn't sleep for days. You told the priest. You told your spouse. You wrote the name in your private journal, the one you don't show anyone. Just one word beneath it, why? There was no answer. And yet, you continued. Because someone had to. Because the system didn't pause just because it bled. Because guilt doesn't suspend the sun or stop the rain from falling on your garden. You've learned how to carry it. Not bury it, just carry it. Like a stone in your pocket. Always there. Always pressing gently against your leg, just enough to remind you that your job isn't clean. It's not holy. It's not wicked. It's just real. There are rituals you follow now. You sharpen your blade after every use, not just to keep it ready, but to cleanse the moment. You burn herbs in your workshop after a bad sentence. Mugwort, sage, dried lavender. Your spouse says it makes the house smell like a grandmother's pantry. You don't disagree. And you always, always, light a candle. One for every life. A small flame. No prayer, no speech. Just light. Because they deserve at least that. Your apprentice has started doing the same. He doesn't talk about it, but you've seen him. Quietly, at dusk. A single candle on the windowsill, flickering in the wind. You're glad he feels it. Even if it hurts him. Especially if it hurts him. Because numbness is the real danger. That's when mistakes happen. That's when you start seeing people as bodies instead of names. That's when you lose the point. You lean back against the tree by the river. The water moves slowly, lazy with the season. You watch a leaf spin on the current, dancing around a rock, then vanishing around the bend. You whisper a name. Not loudly. Just enough for the trees to hear. And then you go home, sharpen your blade, and prepare for tomorrow. Because mistakes happen. But you will never let them happen the same way again. The cart creaks under you as it rolls slowly out of town, pulled by two tired-looking mules and driven by a man who chews on a stick like it owes him money. You lean back, boots resting on a sack of hay, your tools packed carefully beneath the bench. The road ahead curves gently through the hills, dust rising behind like the faint memory of home. You're traveling for work today. Not because your town suddenly went soft on justice, but because another village 2 valleys over sent word they needed someone with your talents. Their own executioner died last winter, bad fever, tragic story, lovely man by all accounts. The replacement they appointed ran off before his first assignment. Understandable. Not everyone's built for the work. So now, you're the visiting expert. A freelancer in a profession that barely admits you exist. Your apprentice rides behind you on a borrowed donkey, looking less than thrilled about it. He keeps glancing nervously at the tool chest, as if it might rattle open and start whispering names. You think they'll actually pay this time? He asks. You chuckle. That depends if the mayor's the honor your contracts type or the run when the job's done type. Comforting. It's why we get paid up front now. Traveling for execution work is more common than people realize. Smaller villages can't always justify a full-time hangman. Some make do with reluctant guards or conscripted farmers, usually disastrous. A bad swing can ruin more than a morning. That's where you come in. You arrive just before sunset. The village is smaller than yours, more goats than people. The mayor is already waiting, hands clasped tightly like he's meeting royalty, or a dentist. He greets you with a stiff bow. We're grateful for your service. Let's talk inside, you say. Over a bowl of thin stew and some hard bread, you get the details. Theft. Repeated. Finally turned violent. The sentence is hanging. Public, of course. Always public in these places. The crowd needs to see justice the way children need to see bedtime stories end neatly. The platform is shoddy, built in haste. You inspect it by moonlight, your apprentice holding a lantern high. This'll never hold, you mutter. He taps a loose plank. How do people get this wrong so often? They assume it's just tying a knot and dropping a man. They don't realize it's physics, timing, anatomy. You'd get a better job from a stonemason with a strong stomach. You spend most of the night reinforcing the structure. Bracing beams. Reknotting ropes. Checking trap mechanisms. You've done this before, too many times. Executioner by day, carpenter by necessity. Historians still debate how often executioners traveled to other jurisdictions. Some were highly mobile, sent between towns like grim consultants. Others never left home. You've become a bit of both, rooted, yet summoned. The execution is scheduled for morning. You rise early, hands stiff, muscles sore from the overnight labor. The prisoner is already being brought to the platform when you arrive. Young man, maybe 20. Eyes swollen from crying. Legs shaking. The crowd is quiet. Watching. Waiting. You ascend the scaffold with slow, steady steps. Your boots thud on the fresh wood like drumbeats. You nod to the guards. Adjust the rope. Whisper a few words to the condemned. He tries to speak but chokes on his own breath. You don't rush. You never rush. When the lever drops, the rope does its work. The body stills. Silence holds. Then a murmur. The crowd disperses like fog in sun. You stay behind. Check the platform. Log the result. Thank the mayor. Collect your pay. Not all of it, of course. Tough year for grain, he says. You don't argue. Just take what you can and move on. The journey home is quieter. Your apprentice rides beside you this time. I don't know how you do it, he says. You'll learn. No, I mean, walking into a new place, doing that, and then just leaving. You watch the trees pass by. I don't stay for the applause. You never get any. Exactly. You've traveled farther before. Across borders. Into other territories. Once, a noble from a distant duchy requested you by name. Sent a gold ring with the messenger as proof of sincerity. You still wear it, though on a chain, not your finger. The execution was ceremonial. Political. The condemned had fallen out of favor, but the family wanted it done with dignity. You remember the banquet afterward. Lavish. Ridiculous. You sat near the wine barrels. Drank little. Listened a lot. They toasted you. Called you the master of final moments. You smiled politely, pocketed the silver coin they gave you, and left before dessert. Another time, you were asked to officiate, not an execution, but a duel. The combatants insisted on a neutral witness. Someone who knew death but didn't favor either side. You stood between them, sword in hand, and declared the rules. When one fell, you closed his eyes. Sometimes, the town sent for you too late. You've arrived to find a botched hanging, a beheading that went sideways. You've corrected mistakes others tried to hide. One village begged you to redo an execution that went poorly. You refused. The man was already dead. Theater can't undo truth. In one valley town, a frightened judge asked if you could pretend to carry out a sentence, tie the rope, drop the platform, but catch the prisoner beneath in secret. A show, he said. A warning, but not a death. You did it. The man lived. Changed his name. Moved west. Sent you a carved spoon years later, with a note, still breathing, still grateful. Not every job ends in death. Not every journey ends at the scaffold. Your apprentice once joked you should write a guidebook, Traveling Hangman's Almanac, the ropes less traveled. You told him to start with chapter 1, bring your own nails. Nobody ever builds it right. That night, as your home comes into view, you exhale deeply. The porch light flickers, your spouse hung a lantern for your return. The dog, Trial, waits at the gate, tail wagging slow as syrup. The house smells like stew. Your daughter has fallen asleep at the table again. You're home. Until the next village calls. And when they do, you'll pack your tools. Tie your boots. Tighten your belt. Because death is inconvenient. Justice, even more so. But you? You're always on time. You never forget your strangest assignments. Even years later, they sit on a high shelf in your memory, gathering dust but never quite vanishing. They don't visit often, but when they do, they knock softly in the night and whisper, "Remember me? There was the time you were summoned to sentence, a pig." Yes, a pig. It had trampled a child in a neighboring village, and the local priest, unsure whether to treat it as divine punishment or simple misfortune, insisted on a trial. Witnesses testified. The sow was brought into the courtroom on a rope, pink and oblivious. You tried not to laugh. It didn't help. The verdict? Guilty. The sentence? Execution. You were paid in cured meat and 3 wheels of cheese. Your apprentice still tells the story at festivals. Then there was the exorcism. Not of a person, a corpse. A noble family claimed their uncle, recently deceased and buried, was haunting the estate. Knocking on doors. Wilting the roses. Appearing to the cook in the middle of the night and demanding less salt. You were summoned not as a priest but as a professional, someone to quiet the body properly. You weren't sure what they expected. A second burial? A stake through the heart? You brought sage. Lit it. Whispered a few solemn words. Tossed in a handful of earth. Charged them a modest fee and left before they asked for a receipt. A week later, the haunting stopped. Or maybe the cook started using better seasoning. Historians still debate whether executioners were used for spiritual matters, or if desperate villagers simply blurred the line between law and ritual. In your experience, desperation doesn't care about categories. It just wants results. You've been called to pronounce animals dead. To oversee duels between arguing cousins. To bind contracts between rival merchants, your presence lending an unsettling seriousness to even the most mundane handshake. One time, you were asked to watch over a cursed well. The village swore it whispered names. That anyone who drank from it dreamed of crows and fire. You sat beside it for 2 nights, drinking nothing but your own cider, and concluded that it probably just had bad moss and worse rumors. Still, they paid you to toss in a coin and say a blessing. You made up the words. They clapped. There's a certain reverence people have toward you, like a walking omen. You're not always asked to punish, but you are often asked to witness. To lend presence. Authority. Finality. Your shadow is enough to make people reconsider a lie. Your silence is louder than most men's sermons. One woman asked you to bless her wedding bed. I just want to be sure, she said, that nothing lingers. You assumed she meant an ex-lover, or a bad omen. You mumbled a few phrases, touched the frame with a branch of lavender, and fled before the ceremony began. You weren't staying for that party. Your apprentice nearly wept with laughter. Do I have to do that someday too? Only if you live long enough, you replied. And of course, there are the dreams. A merchant once asked you to interpret his nightmares. Said he kept seeing his late father, mouth sewn shut, standing in a shallow grave. You're not a dream reader, but you told him what he needed to hear. Make peace with the living. The dead don't change their minds. He paid you in honey and didn't look quite so haunted afterward. You were once asked to marry a couple. Not because you were ordained, just because they thought the executioner's blessing would ward off infidelity. You declined. Politely. Suggested the priest instead. But they insisted. So you stood there, sword sheathed, said something solemn about truth and endings, and called it done. They're still together, apparently. Even named their son after you. Poor kid. You keep a box under your bed, a collection of odd mementos from these jobs. A piece of cursed rope, really just moldy, a shard from a haunted mirror, a carved wooden goat given to you after the pig trial, with an ironic grin, and a small, sealed scroll labeled, "Do not open, for emergencies only." You've never opened it. Mostly because you suspect it's just blank paper. But still. These strange requests, as bizarre as they are, remind you of something vital. People don't see you as just a blade. They see you as a wall between order and chaos. Sometimes that means execution. Sometimes it means babysitting a goose they believe contains the spirit of their grandmother. You once found yourself asked to banish a ghost from a bakery oven. You brought salt, muttered a few lines from an old song, and banged a wooden spoon against the brick 3 times. The baker gave you 5 loaves and a promise never to speak of it again. And then there's the boy who asked you to find his missing kitten. That one still sits with you. He came to your door, tiny and trembling, holding a piece of string. They said you find things that go away, he whispered. You searched the alley. Called softly. Eventually found the kitten under a cart, covered in flour and meowing indignantly. The boy hugged you. Didn't say thank you, just ran off with the cat, string trailing behind. You sat on your stoop that evening, polishing your blade, smiling. Because some jobs leave you cleaner than they find you. So yes, your work is about death. But it's also about ghosts, and pigs, and dreams, and strange old women who swear their chickens are cursed. And through it all, you stay steady. Reliable. Unfazed. Because when people ask for strange things, they don't want explanations. They want you. The one who stares into the abyss, and occasionally helps them find their cat. There's a moment, not loud, not grand, but quiet and sure, when you begin to realize, this might not be forever. That someday, your tools will stay on their hooks. The scaffold will creak under someone else's boots. The square will fill with curious eyes, but no one will be watching you. Retirement. It's a word that once felt like a joke, something for farmers with aching knees or tailors who couldn't see their stitches anymore. But now? It visits you sometimes, slipping into your thoughts like mist. Not because your hands tremble. Not because your aim is off. You're still sharp. Still steady. But the weight, it's changed. Not heavier.